Hello ladies, welcome to Homemaking Radio. I'm Lydia Ruth. If you would please click the link in the description box and go to the page on which I have posted this video so that you can see the pictures that go with it and maybe some of the links that I have spoken of while I've addressed you today. And speaking of dressed, I hope that you will get dressed to come to class, or if you are wanting to do more at home while you listen, at least dress for it, because I think that it also changes motivation and mood. And one of the things that we learned back in the day was don't let yourself go. And they would particularly tell this to the younger women. It's easy to get kind of casual and lazy because you rely on your youthful appearance and it really doesn't matter. But we also need to remind the young to get ready, because when you start taking care of yourself, you can't forget it, and it becomes part of your habits. And so it's very hard if you haven't bothered with taking care of yourself, your hair, your skin, your clothing, or your posture or anything like that, because then when you start to get vital like we are, which of course you know what that means, it means all your vitals are still working. Then it's very hard to adjust, because now you start to have a little more care. And one of the things I still remember is don't let yourself go. I think that's so important. How long has it been since you have heard that? I guess a lot of our sayings have been buried in the distant past. So please do that, because the ministry of dressing is so important. You may never be able to speak to someone, and if you're in the house or out of the house, your clothing is a message. It says a lot about how you feel about the gift of life, and how and also a lot of us when we were younger like to mood dress, where today feels like blue, today feels like yellow. And so that is one of the things that many of us, I remember a high school I went to back in the 60s where probably most of the young girls knew how to sew and would show up in a new dress from where they got the fabric at the local fabric store, and they wear a new dress. We didn't have uniforms, and they would wear a new dress to school. We dressed up for school, remember that? So if you could remember that, many of you in your homes think, well, no one's going to notice, I don't have anywhere to go. But I think that we need to give dignity to the life that you have. And today I'm going to be talking about the things that you will need in hard times. My last video, I began that and it got cut off. But since then I've had my young technicians here correcting everything, and it's just been wonderful. And so today I'm going to try to talk a little bit more about that. But before we get started, I want to share my tea with you. And I told you before, what I'm doing now is I'm trying a different, this is called hibiscus berry. And you can get it from many different brands. This is organics. And I like to just make a cup of it and smell it. I don't always like to drink. Some things are just a little bit too pungent, too bitter for me, but I like to, so I'm going to make it anyway. And in here is something called the tea filters, or tea sacks. And what they are, they're little sacks that you can put make your own tea, and you can put a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of whatever you like in here. And I discovered a tea combination that I could actually make myself. Anyway, you put it all in here, maybe just a teaspoon worth for a cup, and you tuck it all in like that, and you just dip it in your cup. And you can get these easily. I'm going to order a couple boxes of them for myself. But this was called the sinus headache tea. And I read about this on somewhere on the web, and you just put turmeric, oregano, ginger, peppermint, oat straw in there, and just put it in a little sack like this and dip it in your cup. And I'm telling you, it was so helpful the other day. Those very same things, if you can get the oil or the waters, you can scent a bath with it. and if you have trouble with sinus or headaches. But I will put that little recipe on there for you. And so today I also want to talk about the different things you're going to need in hard times. Everybody's talking about hard times. They want you to buy these big boxes of dried food and vacuum sealed everything. And but I had the idea that we need something else to go with it, and it's all spiritual in a way. And one of the things is, let me see if I can find it in my little book. By the way, you can order yourself a little booklet. We got a bunch of these for the church members, and it has, you can put whatever label you want on it, and it fits. So it has a little pen in it, plus a little marker, which is really nice because then you don't have to mark it with the pen. Plus a little piece of elastic here to tie over the pages you've already used, and then a marker like this in it. And this is, I think, from the National Pen Company. I'm not sure. They don't have a label on it. But it fits so nicely in your apron pocket or your purse. Now, so the first thing, which is what I always talk about when I come here, is your appearance. I've had days where I knew I had to lay in a little bit longer. I've had days when my children were growing up where I could tell they just didn't need to be getting up. That's one of the advantages of homeschooling, is you need your brain to be well rested and renewed, and you can't if you're jumping up at the crack of dawn and rushing the children off to school or rushing yourself off to work. And we'll talk more about that later, I hope. And so the first thing would be, in hard times, you tend to be more isolated in hard times, so maybe you're more cooped up in the home with each other, and that's why I think the appearance is so important. So you can encourage the children to spend a little time in the bathroom, clean up after themselves, make it as though they hadn't even been there and that they're preparing for a guest. When they get finished, put all their things out of sight and put things where they go, wipe up any spills. I heard someone tell me who had been in real estate that he said you'd be amazed how much a clean sink in a bathroom helps in the sale, and how much it ruins the sale, because if there's even a little string of hair over the sink, it can just totally turn off any interest. And so everything, teach your children when they leave the bathroom to leave it as though they hadn't been there. They may even have to sweep and wipe the floor with a cloth. And some of these bathrooms are small enough, it's no big labor to do something like that. So, but your appearance is so important in hard times. And I mentioned in the last video, the one that was cut off, that in hard times you can see photos still of the Depression in all the countries of the world almost, and how people dressed up because they didn't want to appear to have caused any problems. They didn't want to look like someone who was negligent or someone who didn't work or couldn't earn money. And so they always appeared to be at their best, and in public especially. I think it's really important. It may be the only message you give to anyone. You may not talk to anyone, but in a home situation, in hard times, you will be interacting. And even if you don't say a word and no one's in the mood to be spoken to, your mode of dress is going to make a big difference. All winter long here in the U.S. and in the Northwest, I have got stuck on a warm black skirt and a warm black zip-up fuzzy jacket, so I just wasn't comfortable in anything else. It was awfully cold and damp, and so I collected scarves from the dollar store, and they were quite nice, and they were different colors, so I could tie a different scarf around it every day, or a different apron, which brightens up any kind of an outfit. But I still felt that I was dressed up and feminine. And so then I think that your appearance will extend to your hair, and I would suggest you learn to nourish yourself and nourish your hair with natural products and good foods, fresh foods, and fresh air and lots of sleep. in such a way that you don't depend on hairdressers. Hairdressers today it's not the same as hairdressing, where they would dress the hair and they would coil it and fix it up and pin it up and make it better. If you use a lot of chemicals on your hair, it can affect your health sometimes. And we met a lady who used to be a hairdresser but quit the profession because it had gotten more and more into products, and she wanted to know more about how to take care of people's hair, long hair particularly, which they need hairdressers, people that know how to look after hair. And I would suggest you take care of your own and take care of yourself as best you can. There's a lot you can do with those little clips. You know, you can, I'm talking about these clips here, like this one here. There's a lot you can do with them. You can tie your hair all the way up. You can put it halfway up. You can clip sides of your hair with them. And it's just so easy. You don't need a lot of knowledge about it. Try to find my place here. Okay, so the next thing that we need to know about in hard times, this is so important, is not, I said don't let yourself go, but now we need to learn not to let our homes go and not to let our children's appearance go, and to be particular about your home, because in hard times we're going to be facing those walls more than usual, and it's very important to have the house in a pleasant situation, a pleasant condition. And I know homemakers that are always looking around for something to change or improve. They'll walk through, and I suggest you do that. Walk through every now and then to see how things could be more convenient, maybe. You may even question yourself after years and years, like, why am I putting this here when I have to walk clear over here to get it? And change some things. I think that it's really important to make the home work for you so that you're not always working for it. Make it convenient enough. As you can see, I am in the little sewing room today, and behind that curtain, I've hung curtains over the shelves just to keep the dust off of all the sewing projects and materials. And I have also made it into, put a little foam bed here and made it into a bed for one of the children if they should come. And it can also be a little seating area as well. But I put a little shut-off kettle here and some things over there that they could use if they wanted to stay in here and make their own drinks. And then underneath I have a little cooler that has other kinds of things that they could put other kinds of things in it, and a stack of books and magazines. This is more of a feminine room, so I like to make it all like it was an inn. And also have things that we would have had in the old hotels. In the old days they had stationery, so I've had stationery made, you know, letter paper with the stamps and everything there. And I've put notebooks there and a Bible in each room. You remember that? And I have put all kinds of extras in here if someone didn't want to just get up and go in the morning. They want to relax a little bit. But speaking of an inn, one of my grandsons came, and he was staying here for a while to fix things for us. And so he's going to Greece, and I decided that I would make Greek food for him. We'd listen to Greek music and stories and history and that sort of thing while he was here. So while he was working, he brings his work with him too. I decided we had all this, and at the end of the day, after looking up all these recipes, and I will include a recipe that we really liked, I'll include the link for that I found, and you can enjoy it too. At the end of the day, I'd say I'm all done in. So we renamed the place for while he was here called All Done In. So then the other thing is to not neglect yourself and not neglect your homemaking. That's so important. And I've always felt like the bathroom and the kitchen, and the laundry room, which are called the wet areas, you keep those particularly clean. Even if you can't manage the rest of the house, at least those will be clean. And imagine what it would be like to go to a fine hotel and it wasn't clean, and keep your house that way. I have even heard of the health department in some states. They don't like to interfere unless it's absolutely emergency and threatening the neighbor's health. But once in a while, they will have to go. I've known people who have worked in this industry, and once in a while, they'll have to go and tell someone that their house is, and the trash hasn't been taken out, and it's unsanitary, and there are children there, that if they don't, they'll give them a month to clean it up, and then they'll have to come back and inspect it, because the neighbors had begun to be concerned about it. And so we want to be careful, ladies, and although we're not under that kind of threat, most of us, act as though it might happen to you and get it cleaned up, especially if you have children. And you don't need to use chemicals and sprays and detergents and things like that. All you need is a bottle of white vinegar, and that way you can keep it under your kitchen or bathroom sink, and if a child gets a hold of it and dumps it or drinks it, it's not going to hurt anything. You just need that. You can do your laundry in it. You can put it as a rinse also. It helps static electricity, and that way you've not got all that toxic stuff in your house, and you can clean floors with it. You might need something else, but in general, you can do a lot with baking soda and with vinegar for bathrooms and sinks and things like that. And so we want to make sure we don't let the house go either. Now, one of the things that's really good is to have it all cleaned up, because the next day you might not feel well and you might have to rest a little bit more. That's always makes it easier to get well if the house is clean. I always feel such a relief if I maybe once in a while wake up and kind of have a sinus or stomach ache, or just don't want to move too much. I'm always so glad I got that kitchen taken care of, so that if people need things, they can get them without me in there supervising. And I'm always glad that the laundry is caught up, and I'm always glad that the bathroom is clean, because I think that I get well faster, other people get well faster when the house is clean. Also, I want to go into hospitality, because that is something that's very important when you're enduring hard times. And there are different ways to show hospitality to other people, particularly when you're isolated or when you're having hard times. The mail is always so looked forward to and so welcome to get. I remember back in the day when Victoria magazine first began, and I had a particularly sad and lonely week, and my children were real little, and I went out to the mailbox. I was one of these original subscribers. I forget what you're called when you're one of the originals, and I got the cover. They were always very careful with the cover, and it didn't have anything over it, and you just pulled it out. There's always a big bouquet on it, and that month was a beautiful red and white bouquet that just hit my eyes, hit my senses, and I brought in all the mail, and I felt so much better. And so even a little tiny card from the dollar store, if it's pretty, that's so appreciated. That's your hospitality, and saying something nice and making people feel welcome to be here on earth. And so I wanted to read, I had begun to read this, and it was Emily Barnes' Simple Secrets to a Beautiful Home. You can get this at I don't know, maybe a Christian bookstore online, or just anywhere, Amazon or anything like that. So I wanted to read about the heritage of hospitality, and she had mentioned how important it is to show hospitality to our people. So I'll reread this. This is from last time before I got cut off, and so I will continue. Not just for company. So this is so important in hard times. Have a good appearance. Don't neglect yourself. Don't neglect your house. Look through if something's bothering you about a certain area, maybe there's some of the common rooms where people are, if it needs a little brightening up or something. You can do a lot at the dollar stores. You can make yourself a nice big bright pillow or a bouquet or something with things you can get at the dollar stores. And it's just the brightness that probably needs and the freshness. Just the goal of hospitality is to make guests feel special and loved, but why should that effort be reserved only for company? I really believe true hospitality should be an everyday attitude in our homes, a commitment to sharing our lives with each other as well as our guests. After all, what are we saying to our families, the most precious people in our lives, if we break out the candles and the flowers and the china only for special guests and serve the people we love on paper plates in front of the TV? I'm not going to criticize you if you do that, because as we get more vital, sometimes we end up alone and maybe don't want to. It emphasizes our aloneness if we're sitting at a table with no one else there, so I'm not going to say anything about that. But if you have children, do the tea sets and tea parties for them, and this will give you all a practice and a feeling of ease with it. Should you ever be in a situation where you have to go to a tea or somebody invites you and you feel like maybe it's too formal, do it at home and dress up for it, take pictures, make a memory book, and don't make everything out there more important than what goes on in here. So she talked about sharing hospitality with someone in your own family. And here she has a special message for those who live alone. Well, you may not live alone, but if you're a homemaker, you are going to find yourself alone as people in the family have other plans or you need to be home. And also there are some people that are alone that have no family. So I want to read this to you, how important it is to show hospitality to yourself. I had never thought of it. She was maybe the first one that ever mentions what's called self-care, which all I call it is human maintenance. If you live alone, take the time to share a little hospitality with yourself. I think this is very important because we get too caught up socially. It's almost an addiction to have a social life, and so we don't take good care of ourselves. We care more for others than we do for ourselves, and we lose our dignity and our connection with God as a special human being that He gave life to. Resist the temptation to graze out of the refrigerator or eat a sandwich over the sink. Resist the temptation to fork up a microwave dinner from its cardboard container or skip meals altogether. At least some of the time, take the trouble to prepare a meal, set a place at the table, and sit down in Thanksgiving. I remember when the web first began and blogging was all the rage, and a lot of women were doing homemaking things on the blog, and there was one woman that just merely set out a different place setting every day, and she had several sets of dishes, and she would mix and match them and put different centerpieces and flowers, and it'd be just one picture of this place setting, which I thought was absolutely wonderful, and what a thing to get up and look forward to every day if you're alone. And it's like the people that teach the watercolor art classes. Sometimes I'll take a free course on YouTube, and they'll say, go out and buy a such and such, and you have to buy a pear or an orange. And it's really interesting if you're alone to go and have that goal in mind because you're taking a class. So let me finish reading this about taking care of your own hospitality if you are alone. When you treat yourself like an honored guest, you will find yourself much better nourished in body and spirit and encouraged to reach out to others as well. And so this is such a good, she has a whole chapter on hospitality. She talked about how she had a special hospitality for her daughter and got out tea things, and she said that she put those away after her daughter grew up and brought them out again to remember. So So she says you can share your life through hospitality and open your home for various things. But if we're having hard times and we're more isolated, that might not happen. And so your family has to be your support group, and you can edify them and build them up by showing hospitality to them at home. And also, if you have daughters at home, or even sons, tell them hospitality is part of the Christian service, and that we're going to practice it now. We're going to see at the end of whatever we're serving or doing, how it could be improved or how to make it easier, and learn to do it with ease at home, and then you'll never be nervous when it's time to do it. Also, let me talk about we want to talk about homemaking. I've pretty much told you, just don't let it go, and there are plenty of things that you can buy or read that will help you. And I notice on Pinterest, if you'll follow me on Pinterest, sometimes I'll post or someone's ideal of, the homemaking. And so I'm going to read to you today from a book called The Best of Peter Marshall by his wife Catherine Marshall, where she recorded many of his sermons. He was the chaplain of the U.S. Senate. I don't know if they even have them anymore. From 1946 to 48 under Harry Truman. And I wanted to read what he wrote, a sermon here. And I have a list of things that might be helpful to you in one. I'll try to list them on the blog. That's why I want you to go over and listen to this over there. And you can just click the link on and go, and it'll be down at the end of the post. Keepers of the Springs by Peter Marshall. All of these, I think, can be found online. You might want to just print them off. And the other was When Queens Ride By. There are several reviews of that on YouTube, and it is printable somewhere. You could probably, someone had printed it up in narrative form rather than in the play form. And the other one was Women's Lib by Taylor Caldwell, which I read to you. And then there was one other that I thought you might like. It was called The Wife by Washington Irving. And I believe maybe he wrote, was it Knights of the Round Table? I'm not sure. Might have to look him up, 1800s. And I loved The Wife, and it was about a man who was going broke. And he didn't want to tell his wife that she wouldn't be able to live the way she was accustomed to, kind of like us, when we have to downgrade, downsize, and he did not want to give her the bad news. But finally he had to tell her. But they had a place that they could go, and I don't know if they owned it or not, but it was a little place out in the country. It didn't have all the luxury of where they had been living in, I believe it was London. And he was afraid to go home that night because he thought she'd be so angry with him for reducing her to all that. And when he got in the house, he couldn't find her because but then he heard her singing somewhere, and he went outside, and she was either picking apples or strawberries, and she was pointing to the blossoms around, and she was saying, "Oh, it's just wonderful out here." And how many of us have had the opportunity to behave that nicely when things crashed around us, and we're able to build. I know several women that this happened to, but they always said, "I know that things are going to get better," and they did. So I'm going to read Keepers of the Springs because I think, and also think that your young ladies, if you've got any young homeschool girls that are thinking about, the choices that they think they have of maybe leaving the home and going out to work or staying home, we want to encourage them to stay home because we believe that God knows what's best for us, and that He elevates us through that, and that you actually stand in a more important position of the home because you get to regulate yourself. You get to decide what you're going to do at home, and you won't be regulated by another authority outside of the home in business, in industry. And I read to you about Taylor Caldwell and what she said when she had liked some man that seemed like someone who really wanted a homemaker, but he said she had gotten so independent he thought that there would be a conflict. And that is one of the things that many of the authors of books about manhood and womanhood back in the day would say, is if you get to working outside the home, you can't serve two masters, and you tend to think more about what the employer wants, of course, because you're getting paid and you want to keep the job. And but at home, it's harder to concentrate if you've got another job to do. But I want to read about Keepers of the Springs, because what he did was he told the story of a spring that had to be cleaned because the water flowed down into the town, into this fountain where people got their water. And so there was someone there that was cleaning that spring, and he compares it to the woman, and particularly the mother. But I would think that even if you live alone, you are a keeper of the springs too, and meaning influence. So when I read this to you, you'll find out that it means influence. Once upon a time, a certain town grew up at the foot of a mountain range. It was sheltered in the lee. Do you know what lee means? Is that a bank, or is it where the wind blows? Of the protecting heights, so that the wind that shuddered at the doors and flung handfuls of sleet against the window panes was a wind whose fury was spent. High up in the hills, a strange and quiet forest dweller took it upon himself to be the keeper of the springs. He patrolled the hills, and whenever he found a spring, he cleaned its pool of the silt and fallen leaves, of mud and mold, and took away from the spring all foreign matter, so that the water which bubbled up through the sand ran down clean and cold and pure. It leaped sparkling over rocks, and dropped joyously in crystal cascades, until, swollen by other streams, it became a river of life to the busy town. Children laughed and played on its banks in the sunshine, but the city council was a group of hard-headed, hard-boiled businessmen. They scanned the civic budget and found it in the salary of the keeper of the springs. Said the keeper of the purse, "Why should we pay this romance ranger? We never see him. He's not necessary to our town's work life. If we build a reservoir just above the town, then we can dispense of his services and save the salary." Therefore, the city council voted to dispense with the unnecessary cost of a keeper of the springs, and to build a cement reservoir. So the keeper of the springs no longer visited the brown pools, but watched from the heights while they built the reservoir. When it was finished, it soon filled up with water, to be sure, but the water did not seem to be the same. It did not seem to be clean, and a green scum soon befouled its stagnant surface. There were constant troubles with the delicate machinery of the mills, for it was often clogged with slime, and the swans found another place above the town. At last an epidemic raged. The clammy yellow fingers of sickness reached into every home in every street and lane. The city council met again. Sorrowfully it faced the city's plight, and frankly it acknowledged the mistake of the dismissal of the keeper of the springs. They sought him out of his hermit hut high in the hills, and begged him to return to his former joyous labor. Gladly he agreed, and began once again to make his rounds. It was not long until pure water came lilting down under the tunnels of ferns and mosses, and to sparkle in the cleansed reservoir. Mill wheels again turned. Stenches disappeared, sickness waned, and convalescent children began playing in the sun again, and the swans had come back. Do not think me fanciful, too imaginative, or too extravagant in my language, when I say that I think of women, and particularly of our mothers, as keepers of the springs. The phrase, while poetic, is true and descriptive. We feel its warmth, its softening influence. And however forgetful we have been, however much we have taken for granted life's precious gifts, we are conscious of wistful memories that surge out of the past. Nothing that has been said, nothing that could be said, or ever will be said, would be eloquent enough, expressive enough, or adequate enough to make articulate the peculiar emotion we feel to our mothers. So I shall make my tribute a plea for keepers of the springs who will be faithful to their tasks. Never has there been a time when there was a greater need for keepers of the springs, or when there were more polluted springs to be cleansed. If the home fails, the country is doomed. The breakdown of the home life and influence will mark the breakdown of the nation. Remember, Taylor Caldwell said that once a woman got a salary, she was practically doomed. And then the ending of her little booklet was that the strength of a nation lies in its homes. If the keepers of the springs desert their posts or are unfaithful to their responsibilities, the future outlook of this country is black indeed. The generation needs keepers of the springs who will be courageous enough to cleanse the springs that have been polluted. It's not an easy task, nor is it a popular one, but it must be done for the sake of the children, and the young women of today must do it. Now, that's like if you have a society out there, they're the end of the stream. We're the beginning of the spring, where we teach the manners, and that was the one thing that I was going to mention also that would be needed in hard times was manners. You would definitely need manners in hard times, especially if you're isolated or you're in a group together. These are so important. This is what makes life civil, no matter what hard times you have. But he says here, the emancipation of womanhood began with Christianity, and it begins with Christianity. And I had said, I think in a previous talk, that you could go through ancient everything, the ancient world, and say that women always worked. They were either slaves or forced labor or working, and that the elite of the women may not have been working. But what happened, and you could prove it too, but what happened is that it's so interesting that in the New Testament and in Titus 2 and 1 Timothy 5:14 and other references, and also you can see it in the Old Testament, that God had set the women of the home and the women of the church aside for a very special role in life that set them apart from the world. We don't, just because women work doesn't mean we have to go out there. And I'm talking about getting a job. I'm not talking about work. We work. We all work, even if all you're doing is fixing tea for someone or poofing a pillow. That's work, and that's part of what makes life livable. And so we're set aside. We know that I'm not going to be mad at. I don't think that I should tell everybody that women need to be. I don't think that I would do that to anybody. Obviously, women are going to get jobs, but the Christian women are set apart for something more noble, as he says here. And he says, that men have recognized that womanhood is a sacred and noble thing, and that women are of finer clay, are more in touch with the angels of God, and have the noblest function that life affords. Wherever Christianity has spread for 1900 years, men have bowed and adored this role. It remained for the 20th century in the name of progress, in the name of tolerance, in the name of broad-mindedness, in the name of freedom, to pull her down from her throne as keeper of the home and try to make her like a man. She wanted equality. For 1900 years she had not been equal. She had been superior in her role. You know, you can't be superior to a woman in her own home. There's not anyone greater as a homemaker. She's the homemaker. And I think what's so sad today is that women are not loved and admired and respected enough or cherished enough to allow them to take on this wonderful role. And I want to read something that someone wrote way back in the 1920s in a newspaper that you might find interesting. But now, they said, she wanted equality, and in order to obtain it, she had to step down. And so it is. And also remember that Adam was told to work to labor by the sweat of to toil by the sweat of his brow, but Eve was not. And so it is that in the name of broad-minded tolerance, a man's vices have now become a woman's. 20th century tolerance has won for women the right to become intoxicated, the right to smoke, the right to work like a man, act like a man, talk like a man. For is she not a man's equal? Today they call it progress, but tomorrow, oh, you keepers of the springs, they must be made to see that it is not progress. No nation has ever made any progress in a downward direction. No people have ever become great by lowering their standards. No people have ever become good by adopting a looser morality. It is not progress when the moral tone is lower than it was. It is not progress when purity is not as sweet. It is not progress when womanhood has lost its fragrance. Whatever else it is not progress. Our country today needs women who will, and I will just change this to our homes. So much emphasis is on, make our country great and everything. Let's make our homes great. And I'm sorry about the light that's coming in here, my backlight there. But you're just listening, aren't you? And our country needs women today who will lead us back to an old-fashioned morality. Our homes need today to an old-fashioned purity and sweetness, to old-fashioned decency, and I'd say old-fashioned dressing too. This generation has seen an entirely new type of womanhood emerge from the bewildering confusion of our time. We have in the United States today a higher standard of living than any other country or any other time in the world's history. We have more automobiles, more picture shows, more telephones, more money, more radios, more television sets, more crime, more divorce than any other nation in the world. Part of that is because by sheer population, it's always more. Yes, it's always more. But I wanted to stop for a minute from this little sermon he had and show you an interesting picture from this old book, The Christian Charm Course, that I found, and I got to thinking how much this is needed today. And it was called How Feminine I Am. It's a shame that the women's lib movement was called feminist because it gets so confusing for people. Feminine, feminist. How Feminine I Am. It showed on one of these pages, page 32 of this book, The Christian Charm Course by Emily Hunter, 2 pictures here, and I will try to put that on the blog. And here's a girl, and she's got like expletives coming out of her mouth, and of course you can dress nice. This is more feminine, and I showed this to. By the way, the boys often miss out on this, what the difference between masculine and feminine is, and they miss out on understanding the role of women at home because we're teaching them, to be able to be good providers, but they need to learn to look for women that want to be home and dress femininely, and